The sea off the coast of Normandy is calm tonight. Too calm almost. Somewhere out there in the dark, a ship is about to leave the harbour at Barfleur, carrying nearly 300 souls, laughter, wine, and the future of an entire kingdom. None of them know it yet, but by morning almost all of them will be dead. This is not simply the story of a shipwreck. Shipwrecks happened often in the 12th century, forgotten within a season, mourned only by the families left behind. This one was different. This one reached into the throne room of England and tore something out of it that could never be replaced. A single night, a single decision, a single wave, and the entire future of a nation changed course forever. To understand why this wreck mattered so much, we have to go back a little further. We have to understand what exactly was riding on that ship. A kingdom resting on one life. By 1120, King Henry I of England had spent nearly 2 decades holding his kingdom together through sheer force of will. He had seized the throne after the death of his brother William Rufus, under circumstances that still raised quiet questions. He had fought to secure Normandy across the Channel. He had negotiated, married, and maneuvered his way into becoming one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. But power built by one man is fragile the moment that man is gone. And Henry knew it. He had fathered over 20 children in his lifetime, an almost absurd number, but nearly all of them illegitimate, unable to inherit his crown by the laws of the time. Only one child carried the legitimacy the throne required, one son. William Adelin, 17 years old, already married into the powerful house of Anjou, already recognized by the barons of England and Normandy as the heir who would one day rule them both. William wasn't just a prince. He was the single thread holding together everything his father had built. If William lived, England had a future, a clear line, a settled peace. If William died, everything Henry had spent his life constructing would be thrown back into uncertainty, because England had no rule, no precedent, no accepted tradition for a woman to inherit the throne directly, and Henry's only other legitimate child was his daughter, Matilda. Everything depended on one young man crossing one channel safely. He would not, the ship that seemed too good to fail, in November of 1120, King Henry prepared to sail back to England after settling matters in Normandy. As he made ready to depart, a ship captain named Thomas Fitzstephen approached him with a request that at the time must have seemed almost trivial. Thomas's father had once captained the ship that carried Henry's father, William the Conqueror, across this very channel decades earlier. Thomas asked for the honor of carrying King Henry himself aboard his vessel, the White Ship, a fast, newly fitted craft, considered one of the finest in the fleet. Henry declined. His own travel arrangements were already set, but he offered Thomas something else, something that in hindsight feels almost unbearable to say out loud. He offered him his son. William Adelin would sail on the White Ship instead, along with a glittering company of Norman nobility, young lords, ladies of the court. 2 of the king's illegitimate children, friends, cousins, advisors, nearly the entire next generation of Anglo-Norman leadership, gathered together on a single vessel, sailing after dark, in celebration, in wine, in the confident belief that nothing could touch them. They were, after all, the future of the kingdom. What could possibly go wrong? Into the dark water. The passengers had been drinking, heavily by most accounts. The crew had too. Someone suggested a wager, that the White Ship, fast as she was, could easily overtake the ships that had already departed earlier that evening, including the king's own vessel. So, well after nightfall, with the tide low and the water treacherous along the Normandy coast, the White Ship pushed away from the harbour at Barfleur. The sea outside that harbour was not forgiving. Hidden beneath the surface, jagged and waiting, lay the rocks known as the Quilleboeuf, close enough to shore that experienced sailors knew to fear them, especially at night, especially with a crew that had been drinking, especially with a captain eager to prove his ship's speed. The oarsmen pulled hard. The ship gathered speed in the darkness, and then without warning wood met stone. The White Ship struck the rocks with a force that tore open her hull. Cold water rushed in through the wound in the ship's side. Screams cut through the night air. Panic spread faster than the water itself, nobles and sailors alike scrambling in the dark, most of them unable to swim, most of them weighed down by heavy winter clothing, all of them suddenly, violently aware that this celebration had become a fight for their lives. A prince's final choice. In the chaos, a small boat was launched. William Adelin was placed inside it. For a moment, impossibly, the heir to the throne of England was safe, pulled away from the wreckage, away from the freezing water, away from the screaming. He should have kept rowing. But somewhere in the darkness behind him, William heard a voice crying out. His half-sister Matilda, Countess of Pichère, was still trapped in the wreck, still fighting the water, still calling for help. William turned the boat around. It's impossible to know exactly what passed through his mind in that moment. Loyalty, love. Perhaps simply the instinct that no future was worth building on the memory of a sister he left behind to drown. Whatever the reason, he ordered the boat back toward the sinking ship, and that decision killed him. The moment the small boat came close enough, desperate survivors, drowning, freezing, terrified, threw themselves toward it, clawing for any chance of survival. Too many hands reached for too little wood. The boat capsized under their weight, and William Adelin, heir to the throne of England, disappeared beneath the same cold water that had already claimed nearly everyone he had sailed with that night. Of the almost 300 people aboard the white ship, only one survived. A butcher from Rouen, wrapped in heavy furs against the cold, clinging to a piece of wreckage until morning, when fishermen finally found him. Through him, and him alone, the world would learn what had happened in the dark waters off Barfleur. ***, a silence that broke a kingdom *** for days. Nobody dared tell King Henry the truth. His court had watched an entire generation of Anglo-Norman nobility vanish overnight, and every person around him understood exactly what that silence would cost him personally. Finally, according to the chroniclers of the time, a young boy was sent to deliver the news, kneeling before the king, weeping, unable to find the words until Henry understood without being told. It is said that Henry I never smiled again. Whether that detail is legend or truth hardly matters. What is certain is this: the king who had spent his entire reign securing a stable, uncontested succession now had none. His only legitimate son was gone. His remaining heir was his daughter Matilda, and England in 1120 was simply not prepared to accept a woman as its ruling monarch. Henry spent his final years desperately trying to force the nobility to accept Matilda as his successor, extracting oath after oath of loyalty from barons who nodded in his presence and doubted in private. And the moment Henry died in 1135, those doubts exploded into open conflict. Matilda's cousin, Stephen of Blois, seized the throne instead, and England collapsed into nearly 2 decades of brutal civil war, a period so devastating that people at the time simply called it the anarchy. Villages burned, crops failed, law dissolved into local warlordism. An entire generation of English men and women lived through chaos that traces back, thread by thread, to one overloaded boat, one drunken wager, and one set of rocks in the dark water off Barfleur. One night, one wave, one nation changed. Historians still debate how differently England might have looked if William Adelin had simply stayed in that small boat. A clean succession. No civil war. Perhaps an entirely different path for the English crown for centuries afterward. We will never know. Because on one ordinary November night, on a ship believed too fast, too fine, too fortunate to fail, 300 lives and an entire nation's certain future sank into the cold water off the coast of Normandy. Sometimes history doesn't turn on the great battles or the famous betrayals. Sometimes it turns on a single small boat, a single act of love, and a single wave that no one saw coming until it was already too late. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more forgotten chapters of history, and let me know in the comments. Do you think England's history could have been different if William Adelin had lived?